Situated roughly 10 miles north of Manchester, Bury is a market town on the River Irwell populated by roughly 200,000 people across all of its small boroughs. Bury is perhaps most famous for its black pudding and allegedly its world-famous Bury Market, that Rishi Sunak once confused with Burnley Market, which was quality, to say the least. Bury is also where we happen to call home, and in today's video we wanted to explore one of the most well-known historical figures from Bury, Sir Robert Peel, who is considered to be the father of modern policing. Sir Robert Peel, 2nd Baronet, was born on the 5th of February 1788 in Bury, Lancashire, and was one of 11 children of Sir Robert Peel, 1st Baronet of Drayton Manor, not the theme park Drayton Manor, and Ellen Yates. Robert Peel, 1st Baronet, homeschooled his son, Robert Peel, 2nd Baronet, until the family moved to Drayton Manor in Staffordshire in 1798, when Robert Peel was aged roughly 10 years old. It was shortly after this point in 1800 that Peel Sr. was made a baronet, which is in fact the lowest hereditary honour which can be awarded by the British Crown. Peel Jr. attended a school in Tamworth until the age of 12, when he then went on to study at Harrow, a prestigious school formed in the year 1572 under a royal charter granted by Queen Elizabeth I, remaining there until he was 16 years old. Following studying at Harrow, he then moved on to Christ Church College at Oxford University. He earned double first-class honours in classics and mathematics. Initially, after graduating from Oxford University, Robert Peel's original plan was not to go into politics, but to in fact become a barrister, which he intended to do by entering Lincoln's Inn, which was one of 4 inns of court in England and Wales where barristers are called to the bar. However, this plan changed when his father arranged for his entry into Parliament through the rotten borough of Cheshire, Tipperary in Ireland, which means a borough which has a very low population, which can be controlled by wealthy landowners. Coincidentally, his father was such a landowner, being one of 10 known millionaires in England at the time through his large cotton industry. At the age of 21 in 1810, Sir Robert Peel made his maiden speech in the House of Commons, shortly after the King's speech following the opening of Parliament. At this point of time, the government was headed by Spencer Perceval, and then in June of the same year, Robert Peel was given his first government position as Under Secretary of State for War and the Colonies. Then on, Robert Peel's period in government was a milestone for social reform, cutting work hours for women and children and creating cheap and regular rail services, along with reorganising the policing of London, specifically into a format that we see prevalent more modernly. Being the son of one of the country's only millionaires at the time, naturally, a lot of Peel's political ambition came from his father. Robert Peel's father's ambitions for his son were reportedly so great that apparently he once said, "Bob, if you don't become Prime Minister one day, I will disown you." This is a bit extreme if you ask me, and that's a tall order. I'm not sure what he was expecting, but he did it. Peer pressure. Am I right? Whether or not this was a threat or just a joke, I do not know. There's also a good chance that this was fabricated purely because it sounds better in a story. Across his career as an MP, Peel would represent many constituencies, including that of Oxford University. From 1812, Peel became the Chief Secretary for Ireland, a position he resigned from at some point between 1817 and 1818, and in 1822, Peel became Home Secretary, a position he held until April of 1827, and then resumed in January of 1828 until November of 1830. During his time as Home Secretary, Peel introduced several important reforms to British criminal law. His changes to penal codes alone resulted in roughly 100 fewer crimes resulting in capital punishment, reducing the rate at which the death penalty would be carried out exponentially. Peel also reformed the gaol system with payment for jailers and education for the inmates as to attain reform in some instances rather than simple punishment for those who could be saved from their criminal lives. In his later years as Home Secretary, Peel, who had always opposed Catholic emancipation, was persuaded of the case for it and pushed the Catholic Emancipation Bill through Parliament, arguing civil strife to be a greater danger than the Catholics. In 1829, whilst serving as Home Secretary, Peel also created the Metropolitan Police for London, which led the police to being referred to by Bobby or Peeler. Initially, the idea was presented in 1827, only to be met by pushback. However, Peel stood his ground, which led to the approval of the Metropolitan Police. At the time, the streets of London were dangerous and lawless. Before the Metropolitan Police was founded, the streets of London were protected by the Watchmen, who were seen by some to be effective at fighting crime, and by others as ineffective, corrupt, or simply inept. The new Metropolitan Police, now known as the Met, was led by 2 commissioners, a colonel and a barrister, overseeing 895 constables, 88 sergeants, 20 inspectors, and 8 superintendents, who wore uniforms to emphasise the civilian element of the job. I can't get my head around that one, but fair enough, and were paid the equivalent to what a farm labourer would earn in order to ensure that officers didn't come under a misguided notion of being above other members of the community. As you can imagine, when put into force, the Rozzers weren't taken seriously right away, but their benefit over the Watchmen came from their ability to handle larger disturbances such as riots. Peel's new police force could be easily identified by their blue tailcoats and top hats, and they patrolled the streets of London starting on the 29th of September 1829. Their uniforms were designed to make the Peelers look more like ordinary citizens and less like soldiers, who at the time wore red coats. They were equipped with wooden truncheons, a pair of handcuffs, and a wooden rattle if they ever needed to raise the alarm. This rattle would be replaced with a whistle by the 1880s. This then became the working model for the creation of more police forces outside of London. Early Victorian police officers worked 7 days a week, they had 5 days of unpaid holiday a year, and they received a sum of £1 per week in wages. Their lives were strictly controlled, they couldn't vote in elections, and they had to have permission to even interact with a civilian in a personal setting. That meaning anything from sharing a meal to getting married. Officers also were required to wear the uniforms, both on and off duty. Robert Peel, meanwhile, went on to become Prime Minister in 1834, serving until his resignation in 1835, before later resuming his role as Prime Minister in 1841 until 1846. He was Prime Minister during a time of economic struggle. Many were out of work and Britain's international trade was slipping. Peel took steps to liberalise trade, allowing for a strong recovery to take place. He also passed the Mines Act of 1842, which banned the employment of women and children underground, and the Factory Act of 1844 that limited working hours for children and women working in factory settings. This isn't to say that Peel was especially liked. Queen Victoria claimed he was a cold, unfeeling, disagreeable man, and the Prime Minister and Queen butted heads on more than one occasion. Despite his skills as a politician, Peel lacked social grace and had an off-putting manner. In June of 1846, Peel managed to repeal the Corn Laws to remove trade barriers on imported corn and drive down the prices in order to send sufficient food to sustain Ireland due to what was known as the potato famine. Due to being defeated on a different bill, Peel resigned at this time. In the end, Sir Robert Peel, 2nd Baronet, passed away on the 2nd of July 1850, aged 62 years old, after falling off of his horse 3 days earlier in London. A statue of the Prime Minister was erected in the town centre of his hometown Bury the following year, and the year after, the Peel monument known as Peel Tower atop what's locally known as Holcombe Hill, officially Harkle's Hill, was also built in honour of Robert Peel. Towering above the borough of Ramsbottom at 1,100 feet above sea level anyhow, it's become something of a landmark for hikers. In fact, in the making of this video, I made the trip up to the tower not once, but 3 times.
Bloody track and half this.
Oh, you're not the one carrying them up.
Just a load of green shit.
Looks a bit like a dick. Common misconception is this town was a memorial to Robert Peel. This is actually built to contain him. If you open these gates, he will escape. I suppose it's interesting that they chose to mine the resources for the tower right next to the tower. Yeah, I mean, it saved them time and effort, but since it's grown back in, it doesn't impact the view. But it's a bit of an interesting choice. Yeah, the Egyptians building pyramids and getting their materials from miles and miles away and building that, and then you have people in good old Bury building a tower by digging into the hill right next to where they want to build it.
Some German engineering thinking.
Yeah, work smarter, not harder. History aside, the views from the top of Holcombe Hill are extraordinary, and I highly recommend anyone in the area to go and check it out. The trip up the hill really isn't too bad, and I'm certain this won't be the last time I make the trek up to the Peel Monument. But as far as this time around is concerned, that is our journey complete. Thank you for watching this video. Be sure to go ahead, like and subscribe, and whack notifications on if you haven't already. It really helps us to grow this brand new history channel we're starting, and with any luck we'll be seeing you all very soon. But until next time, take care and goodbye.
We got it!
Nice one.
Echo! Echo! Ah! 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 I love this echo. Ah! I think it's echoing and then going up the top of the tower.
Right, that's enough. Let's stop terrorising Robert Peel's ghost.